Right. I think we are live now. Sure. Guys, please एक बार पहले मुझे यहाँ पे confirm कर. I'll share this on my Telegram as well so that people can join. Sure. आवाज आ रही है तो एक बार मुझे यहाँ पे आप थोड़ा बता सकते हो तो गुड इवनिंग, वेरी गुड इवनिंग टू एवरीवन. कैसे हो सब लोग? शानदार, मजेदार, धमाकेदार सब लोग होंगे, राइट? तो आवाज आ रही है तो प्लीज एक बार मुझे कंफर्म कर दीजिए कि आवाज आ रही है. प्लीज कंफर्म इफ द ऑडियो इज क्लियर. हेलो, ऑडियो क्लियर है तो प्लीज एक बार मुझे कंफर्म कर दीजिए. मैं भी चेक कर लेता हूँ. Hello. Yes, it is clear. So today we have with us Philip. Philip, आपको you might already know that there is a coin on WazirX that is called STX. So welcome Philip to our channel. It is our pleasure. It is our honor to have you on our channel. And first of all, let me introduce Philip. He is the co-founder of Arcadico Finance. It's based on Stacks, and Stacks is built on over blockchain, over Bitcoin, sorry. So, and Philip is the software engineer and he has done his master's in computer science. So welcome Philip to our channel. And I would request Philip to introduce himself and say some words, a few words on Stacks, on Arcadico Finance, and on why this project can be a good investment for our subscribers, and what is the future of this project. So over to you, Philip.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. Lovely to be here. I've been once to India, loved it a long time ago, can't wait to be back. So love the country. About Stacks, Stacks is a layer 1 blockchain that settles on top of Bitcoin. So it allows you to write smart contracts on Bitcoin. As some of you might know, Bitcoin is not the most expressive language. It's being looked upon as this old dinosaur sometimes that is like a store of value, but that is a rock that is never used. Well, that is a false statement. As of today, you can build smart contracts through Stacks on top of Bitcoin. And so Arcadico, which I am a core contributor of, is one of those first DeFi protocols that is launching still this year within the next 2 months or so.
Right.
Arcadico is special because it is the first stablecoin that allows you to deposit your collateral and earn a yield on that collateral. So the way this works is you mint some stablecoins called USDA, and the collateral that you give to mint your stablecoin for, similar to Maker, you deposit collateral where it is Ethereum. With us, you deposit Stacks tokens. Those Stacks tokens, they're earning a yield for you about 10%, but at the same time, you make those Stacks tokens more capital efficient, and you can use our stablecoin. That's the premise of Arcadico. We want to be this last provider of liquidity on the Stacks blockchain, and we do want to offer liquidity to all of our Stacks users. There's about 400,000 of them today. Now that is Arcadico specifically. I told you Stacks is a layer 1 blockchain. You've probably heard a lot of other blockchains: Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Phantom, Cosmos. They're all layer 1s, and you see this proliferation of layer 1s, especially in the last 6-7 months. There have been, between quotes, Ethereum killers for the last years or so, but each layer 1 has different characteristics, different parameters. They each offer something different. And what Stacks does really well is it's through its novel consensus mechanism called proof of transfer. And proof of transfer is different from something like proof of work, which Bitcoin uses, or proof of stake that Ethereum and Solana, or soon Ethereum and Solana today, uses. Proof of transfer simply allows you to stack your Stacks tokens and earn the yield on those. So if you look up or Google proof of transfer Stacks, you will find a lot about that. And the consensus mechanism is really novel. I definitely highly recommend everyone to look into it. Not financial advice, but might be a good indicator for future monetary financial success.
Right. Philip, one thing that I would like to understand in Stacks, there are two programs. One is Stacks Acceleration and Stacks Foundation, right? So, how does this work, and what are the future prospectus of this? So, if you could throw some light on this.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Stx Foundation is a decentralized entity in the space that supports ecosystem protocols such as ourselves, such as Arcadico. They have an amazing grant program. We went through it. We received a grant of about $50,000 to build Arcadico. It's kind of like no strings attached money where you propose a project. There's a committee that either approves or doesn't approve your project, and then based on milestones, you work on it. So they're a real, a really useful, let's say, bootstrapping element in the space. Really helped us with Arcadico. Still get regular advice, go to market strategies we work on together a bit. So really helpful entity in the ecosystem for Arcadico and other protocols, really. And then you have the Stx Accelerator, which is, you can compare it to like an online Y Combinator, but focused on Web3. So Arcadico just went through it. There were about 25 protocols and companies that went through the latest batch, which just ended last week. Each batch is about 3 months long, and it's super intense. You talk to founders and to the program managers like every day. You work on lean startup techniques, on pitching techniques, raising money, working on your product, basically anything that you need to launch a successful product today in DeFi, NFTs, or Web3 in general.
Right. I would like to understand that as you are the co-founder of Arcadico and it is built on STX, right? So why would someone choose STX and not any other platform? So why would a developer build on STX? That is
that's a fantastic question. And so there's about $1 trillion in Bitcoin market cap, right? And that's sitting relatively idle today. Through Stacks, you can read Bitcoin transactions. So you can do something based on what happens on the Bitcoin blockchain. There's a direct connection between Stacks and Bitcoin. So it allows you to unlock that Bitcoin capital and make it more useful. So that's one thing. Another thing is I briefly touched upon it, which is proof of transfer called POX. So if I talk about POX, I talk about proof of transfer. So POX is the consensus mechanism, but it's also a building block for other protocols. And so what if I told you today that you can earn 10% yield in a trustless, decentralized fashion paid out in Bitcoin today, and other protocols can leverage that? So those two elements, proof of transfer and readability into Bitcoin, are very novel in comparison to something like Solana and Ethereum. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm simply saying there are differences where you give up a part of decentralization. And so Solana, I think, has done that really well. They have chosen or optimized for throughput and speed. I think it does about, don't shoot me on the number, about 60,000 transactions a second or something, but it is less, it's less decentralized than something like Ethereum or Stacks. So each has their pros and cons, and for Stacks, it is the connection to Bitcoin and the yield that you get.
Right. Yeah. So as you rightly said, for Solana, if we compare the scalability, so it requires like, if I remember the number clearly, and I have done some research on that, so it requires like 32 core computer and 1 gigabit gigabit per second of internet and 236 GB RAM. So how would you compare the scalability of this with Solana? So that would be my next question as you are talking about that, right?
Yeah. Look, just a caveat, I always try to be as objective as possible. Obviously, I have a bias because I'm building on top of Stacks, and I believe Bitcoin is the hardest and most sound money. And as a result, our next financial services, which are likely to be decentralized, should be built on top of that. That's what in my core belief. So I do have a slight bias towards Bitcoin and Stacks. Now, on the scaling debate, it really depends what kind of decentralization you need. If your application is not crucial in terms of decentralization, Solana might be a great use case. But if you want to build something censorship resistant that should be decentralized and can handle a little less throughput or doesn't need those 60,000 transactions a second, Stacks is a great candidate. And in terms of scaling, there's a few solutions. So every Stacks block is anchored to a Bitcoin block. If you know that a Bitcoin block is mined every 10 minutes, you know that an anchor block in Stacks is also mined every 10 minutes. Now, that sounds relatively slow, right? If you have to wait 10 minutes for the first confirmation on your transaction, that's too slow. That's why there's a concept called microblocks in Stacks, where approximately every 10 to 30 seconds, a microblock gets mined. Your transaction is simulated so it reaches finality in a microblock, but not in an anchor block. So you can see the outcome of your transaction already in a microblock. So that is mined already and processed on the blockchain. But all those microblocks, they are only finally settled in the next anchor block, meaning the next Bitcoin block that gets mined. So there's this in-between finality, let's call it. I know it's not final, but it's this in-between settlement where you're waiting for your microblock to be put into an anchor block, and that anchor block eventually is then settled on top of Bitcoin, which makes it super secure. So there is this in-between solution where you give up a little bit of decentralization, because Stacks is, you're waiting for that microblock, but a microblock is not as decentralized as an anchor block. And so it's always a compromise, right, between speed and decentralization. And that's Stacks' solution, where they say the microblocks are good if you need faster confirmation than 10 minutes in an anchor block. There are other solutions that help with scalability, but they are still being worked on. Microblocks is live today, so that can be used, but future solutions would be through app chains and subnets, which transparently, I'm not an expert on, but Manip, he is one of the founders of the Stacks blockchain. He has a really good Stacker chats on subnets, I think from last week or 2 weeks ago. If you're interested in that in terms of scalability through subnets, which again is less decentralized. So the more you want to scale, the less decentral you go. But if that interests you, check that out, and really highly recommend that talk.
Right. That sounds good. And one another thing, as we talked about the scalability, right? So the other question that comes here is the gas fees. So if you could talk something about that.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that, because Ethereum, it could cost you $100, $200 to $1,000 in transaction fees. I've seen it all. And so if you look at Stacks, one transaction is, it depends on the cost of your transaction, right? Just like it depends on the cost of an Ethereum transaction. But let's talk about the average transaction here. I've seen average transaction cost of 0.05 to 0.1 Stacks per transaction. And if you know that one Stacks token today is worth approximately $1.5 and you pay 0.1 Stacks for a transaction, that means you're paying about 15 US cents to push a transaction through. Now, obviously, these, don't quote me on this is not set in stone. Gas fees are dynamic depending on supply and demand. Blockchain de facto, as a definition, cannot scale infinitely, right? On the lowest layer, on the layer 1, there's always a restriction to the amount of transactions that you can write in one single block. So people who pay more in the future might, get priority, might get preference. So these gas fees might also go up, like in Ethereum. There could be gas wars. Having said that, there are scalability solutions, as I mentioned before. But today it's super, super cheap, super scalable in terms of using Stacks.
Right. Right. So as you mentioned regarding the proof of transfer, right? So till date, I knew two things. One is the proof of stake, and another is proof of work. That is, proof of work is decentralized and proof of stake is centralized. And in centralized, like the big whales can change the block of transactions, right? And in the proof of work, it is decentralized, so those things are not possible. So as you talked about the proof of transfer here, so like, would you mention what is the difference between the proof of work and proof of transfer? And
Yeah, so proof
if
of work is proof of work is very much based on you spend some energy to solve a mathematical equation to win the next Bitcoin block or whatever chain that you're working on. There's other blockchains such as Ethereum today that use proof of work. So you expense energy basically. This is a little bit different for proof of transfer. Proof of transfer actually reuses the Bitcoin energy. So to run a Stx miner, you really don't need a very strong computer or you don't need a lot of energy. But to be a Stx miner today means that you're bidding Bitcoin in order to get the possibility to mine the next Stx block. So I'll give you an example to make that clear. Imagine you and me were the, let's say for example's sake, we are the two only miners in the Stx network. You want to mine the next Stx block and I want to mine the next Stx block. You bid 1 Bitcoin and I bid, let's say, half a Bitcoin. So in total, there's 1.5 Bitcoin that we are bidding. You, as a result, will get 66% chance to mine the next block because you bid 2/3 of the total and I bid 1/3, half a Bitcoin versus your 1 Bitcoin. So you have a 66% chance of winning the opportunity to mine the next Stx block and write that away into Bitcoin. And so you're not expensing energy, you're just putting up your capital in order to mine the next block. And where does that 1.5 Bitcoin go? Well, that goes to the stackers. So people who own the Stx token like you and me that are stacking in proof of transfer. And that is where that yield also comes from that we use in proof of in Arcadico, and that is inherent to proof of transfer. So that 1.5 Bitcoin, it goes to the stackers. Imagine you mine the next block, what you get is 1,000 Stx tokens as a block reward, and you write the hash of the Stx block away into a Bitcoin transaction and it gets settled. So the difference again between proof of work and proof of transfer is huge, really. I mean, they're two completely different things. One, you expense energy. The other is you put up your capital to win the next block. I hope that makes sense. If not, feel free to elaborate.
Sure, definitely. And I would like to mention that every block on STX is recorded in the Bitcoin blockchain, right?
Correct. Yes, every anchor block. So the micro blocks I talked about, they're combined into one anchor block, and then that is written away. Yeah.
Right. So this brings us to, like, as per our discussion, it brings us to 4 points. Like, one is decentralization, security, scalability, and energy efficiency. So if you could brief about we have already discussed about the decentralization and scalability part of things, but if you could elaborate on security and energy efficiency side of things.
Yeah, so energy efficiency, it is really very energy efficient because the costs of the hardware to run a Stx node and a Stx miner are very minimal. You're simply bidding Bitcoin, but the processing power that is required is really low. The Stx website, docs.stx.co, maybe we can link the URL in the show notes, but it has really great documentation in terms of what is required for hardware. But I've seen people experiment with Raspberry Pi 4s to run both a node and their miners. And a Raspberry Pi costs you about, I don't know what it is these days, maybe $100, $200. But I have a Bitcoin node running here at home on a Raspberry Pi 4 with 1 terabyte hard drive. It costs me about $400 to run this. I could put a Stx node and even maybe a Stx miner on it. So again, I'm only expensing the energy that is being used by that Raspberry Pi 4. I don't know what the cost is in kilowatt hours, but it's definitely not the same as if you're mining Bitcoin. And then so in terms of security, obviously the chain is only as secure as the number of decentralized entities that are mining on it. Imagine there's only 2 miners, yourself and myself, and we collude, we work together. That would not be very secure. So in order to get as many decentralized entities as possible mining Stx today, we need mining to be profitable. And that is really a healthy ecosystem that is growing there because miners are bidding Bitcoin. And so if the Stx price in terms of Satoshis goes down, then those miners will also bid less Bitcoin because it becomes less profitable. So depending on the applications that come online on the Stacks blockchain, such as Arcadico, such as Miami Coin, the City Coin, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but really interesting application that I think everyone should look into. City Coins, it's called. Such applications bring more value to Stacks, and as a result, miners will be more interested to mine Stacks because all things being equal, the Stacks price should be going up relative to Bitcoin. And as a result, those miners want to put up more of their Bitcoin because they get 1,000 Stacks per block reward. And so that brings more decentralized entities to the Stacks ecosystem and to the mining ecosystem and Stacks. And as a result, your security goes up. So security and Stacks is really a function of the usability of Stacks token, I would say. And as evidence, it has been going up. So I do think security is really healthy in Stacks.
Right. Would you like to elaborate on the future of STX Foundation? So as I was reading about STX Foundation, so they are building an ecosystem like on the number of holders. They are also coming up with, these are the smart contracts, right? And even they are coming up with some NFTs. So, and what are the other future prospectus and the future of STX Foundation and even the Arcadico contract?
Yeah, good question. So the foundation specifically, I forgot to mention one really interesting thing. They have started accepting residents. They launched a residence program, basically. So that means that you can go work at the foundation to hack on top of Stacks. If you're a coder or maybe even another role and you have an idea to build something on Stacks or work on Stacks, do some research work, you can apply to the residence program. And they literally pay you to research things and to tinker around. For the scientists among us, that might be really interesting. So that's one thing that has been launched, I think, this week. So it's very new, very interesting. Check that out. Another thing, speaking more about the things that are launched and have been launched in the ecosystem, specifically about NFTs. If you follow the Stack space, one really cool project, if I say so myself, is Stacks Punks. They are the crypto punks, but now on top of Stacks. Some think it's kind of lame. I think it's kind of cool. So every blockchain these days has their own punks. Stacks has their own punks. There have been NFTs launching. Also check it out. There are marketplaces today, wallets to keep your NFTs, such as Boom Wallet, really good wallet. About Arcadico specifically, as I mentioned, we are launching in 2 months. We have an amazing liquidity mining program. So there is a lot of incentives to mine our governance token. Think it will be highly profitable. Again, no financial advice, but check it out. We are arcadico.finance, and you can find more documentation about us on docs.arcadico.finance. Happy to also talk to you in our Discord, Telegram, if you want to know more. But the future is bright for Stacks. There's literally no less than 30, 40 protocols in development. So I think 2022 will be a huge year in terms of Stacks usability. And who knows, maybe even the Stacks price.
Right. Right. So I had another question. So as we were discussing about NFTs and stuff. So what are your thoughts on the Web3 companies or the Web3 technologies, like a token for every project, a token for every organization? So what do you think about that? And how would Stack help with this?
Yeah, I wouldn't be a Bitcoiner if I took the word shitcoin in the mouth. Apologies for the language. But look, my opinion is very clear on that. A token needs a kind of fundamental value for me in order for me to look at it. There's a lot of different types of tokens, such as Stacks, Ethereum, Sol. They're all utility tokens. They are used to pay your gas fees. They have a real use case. In my opinion, they're not securities. They're utility tokens. You have something like Bitcoin, which is more the digital gold. And then you have something like, let's call it a token, a security token, which represents a company. Are we still live?
Let me check. Yes. Yes, we are. Let me ask once. एक बार प्लीज कमेंट सेक्शन में आप बता सकते हो कि आवाज आ रही है या नहीं. The last comment was at 7. Right, आ रही है. Yes, yes, we are still live. Okay. Yes, Philip, please.
Sorry, can you still hear me? I think I'm having some troubles.
I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, because your screen froze for me, so I'll just continue.
Right.
But so I was talking about security tokens, right? A
Yes.
company can just issue their tokens on top of stacks. In my opinion, it's really simple. Just do your fundamental analysis when you buy. And I think that goes for everything. Do some critical thinking, buy if you believe in it, but do your fundamental analysis. There's going to be tons of tokens launching on stacks. In my opinion, some better than the other. But if something interests you and you think it has fundamental value, by all means, go for it. But be careful in terms of utility. Like a dog token can be really cool, right? It's a meme, it's a fun community, but don't expect any intrinsic or fundamental value behind it. That's just my opinion. And there will be dog tokens probably on stacks as well. If they have certain utility, they might be useful and even valuable, but do your own research.
Right. Yeah, that is an insightful point. And when I first heard about, when I was researching about stacks, so basically when I read about it, like stacks is basically building on Bitcoin, right? And building on Bitcoin, everyone knows that it is very, very expensive and things are very, very slow on Bitcoin, right? Like, why would someone build on Bitcoin, and what is the why build on Bitcoin? So that is my question, and why not somewhere else?
Yeah, so building straight on Bitcoin and sending Bitcoin transactions can get relatively expensive. That's definitely true. Now, if you're building on Bitcoin through stacks, as I mentioned, it is a lot less expensive. So you can literally unlock all that Bitcoin value without having the costs of literally working on Bitcoin. So it is a chain that makes Bitcoin or Bitcoin utility a lot less expensive. So I do think that's a big thing. Obviously, why build on Bitcoin and why not on Solana, Ethereum? Again, it really depends on the use case that you're looking at. But I believe in terms of security, in terms of decentralization, if you want to build on a layer that is decentralized from the get-go, you should be building on top of Bitcoin, because your security and decentralization is only as strong as your lowest layer. And as Ethereum, for instance, moves to proof of stake, it might become more centralized over time. I say might, and again, there are degrees of decentralization. It's not a dig at Ethereum, to be completely transparent with you, but it really depends on your use case and on what you want to try to build. If you want to optimize for decentralization, for security, it makes a lot of sense, you know, to build on the hardest and soundest money layer that exists today, which is Bitcoin. So for me, that's the biggest bull case in terms of smart contracts on Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing is like the Bitcoin, the invention that is done by Satoshi Nakamoto. So this thing is like, it has been 10 years now, and still, so we can count on Bitcoin for the next 100 years maybe. So another question that I have is like, you have built, so you are the co-founder of Arcadico Finance and you have built on stacks. So were there any, like, what are the challenges that you faced while building this on stacks STX?
Yeah, there are obviously a lot of challenges when you go to a new layer one. There's a lot of technical challenges. So one thing to note is, for the techies among us, Ethereum is what we call EVM, an EVM chain, and there's a lot of EVM compatible chains. And EVM stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. So something like Binance Smart Chain is EVM compatible. There's even Bitcoin side chains such as Rootstock, RSK, that are EVM compatible. Now, something like Stx, they chose to not be EVM compatible from a design perspective. And that brings obviously challenges with it, but it's also a good thing. So the Clarity programming language, that's the programming language that you use to build smart contracts on Stx on Bitcoin. That one is a lot more secure than something like Solidity. It protects the developer from making basic mistakes or vulnerabilities, such as re-entrancy bugs or things that could drain your contract. It also has certain types, such as fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens built in. So the Clarity programming language is super useful in terms of building on top of Stx, but it's a new language and it is a Lisp-like syntax. So for people who know what the Lisp programming language looks like, it's like a lot of brackets, but it is a bit confusing at the start, and it has a certain learning curve. So that's one of the challenges. You need to learn that with the added thing that if you're building on Stx, your program, your protocol is not as easily ported to other chains such as Ethereum, because Clarity is not EVM compatible. So it has both pros and cons. You don't get the network effect that Ethereum offers today or EVM compatible chains offer today, but you get this new, this new language that allows you to build very secure and very rapid prototyping ideas. So again, pros and cons. Obviously, there's other challenges in it, but the technical ones I found the biggest ones. And everyone I spoke to nearly is super bullish on Stx, which is really cool to hear. It's still a small chain, but that's where the opportunity lies. If you're going to something like Ethereum, where a lot of it has been built already, on Stx, you don't have that. There's still this kind of blue sea that allows you to expand and then prototype and grow together with the layer.
Right. So many things are coming up with Stx. So definitely is a bullish thing for Stx. And is there anything else, like something new that you would like to, that is not there on the website, or anything new that is coming up with Stx, or something that we might not have thought of, or something new that you would like to reveal to our subscribers? Anything like that?
Yeah, so something new that I saw in the last day, probably not new knowledge, is, so Miami Coin, and Miami Coin is a way for people who like Miami to contribute to the city. And so just yesterday, the mayor of Miami approved Miami Coin, and they are going to collaborate together and use parts of the proceeds that come from Miami Coin. So from mining it, the city is going to claim it and use it to pay some of the infrastructure bills that they have, to pay for things that they need to, to pay for to run the city, which is pretty cool. It's the first crypto token that is, directly tied to a city and used by a city, but mined by decentralized entities on top of Stx. Really cool. Check it out.
Right. Definitely a very bullish news for Stx. Right. So I think I have asked most of the questions, my own thoughts and the questions that subscribers had, but I'll check it out if they have any other questions. I don't think there are any other questions except the ones that I have asked, but if you would like to cover anything on top of the questions that I have covered.
Not immediately. I would just say, look, if you're interested in Stx, check it out, play around with it, go to stx.co, which offers you a lot of information. And also arcadico.finance, happy to help with any questions you might have.
Right. And if any of our subscribers wants to ask any direct questions to the developers, so what are the platforms on which they can ask that, like the Telegram and stuff? Do we have that?
You cut off for a second. I don't know if it's my side. Apologies.
Sure. Is it audible now?
No, it's better now. Can you repeat the question, please?
Right. So if anyone, like any of our subscribers, have any questions regarding the project or anything, so are there any platforms on which, for example, Telegram, Discord, on which they can come and ask those questions, and those questions can be answered by the team or the developers?
Yes. So Yep, definitely. We are on Telegram, so check us out. But I would say go to our Twitter. It's twitter.com/arcadicofinance. And there you can find links to Discord and Telegram. We are happy to collaborate, answer any questions that you might have. Would be really glad to have you guys there.
Sure. Thank you, Philip. So I hope all the questions that we had regarding the STX, Arcadico Finance, and the contracts that are built on STX, and how STX is built on the Bitcoin blockchain. So I think you have definitely answered all those questions. So I'm very thankful to you for joining us today and discussing regarding the STX coin and the futures and the future of the STX coin. So I wish you all, the Arcadico Finance team, the STX team, best of luck and all the best for the future endeavors. Thank you. I think Philip, और कोई क्वेश्चन है तो डेफिनेटली आप बता सकते हो। यहाँ पे हम उस क्वेश्चंस के भी आंसर करेंगे, आपके जो भी क्वेश्चंस है। हाँ, अब तो हम हिंदी में ही बात करेंगे जब तक। राइट, बीटीसी का मैं एनालिसिस अभी जस्ट आफ्टर दिस मैं यहाँ पे बीटीसी का भी एनालिसिस करूंगा। जय हिंद, जय हिंद। आवाज आई होप क्लियर आ रही होगी, कुछ कनेक्शन में प्रॉब्लम है। एक लाइक 101 लोग ऑनलाइन है, बट लाइक्स आर ओनली 227 जो लोग चले गए। तो डेफिनेटली लाइक, लाइव सेशन पर लाइक भी बनता है, राइट? अगर लाइक नहीं किया है तो लाइक कर सकते हो, काफी अच्छा लगेगा। कुछ इंटरनेट कनेक्शन में कुछ प्रॉब्लम है उनकी तरफ से। Right, hi.
Yeah, I'm back. Really sorry for all the internet problems. We're living in 2021 and it's still hard to get a decent connection sometimes. But I wanted to say thanks a lot for having me today. Really hope everything is clear. If not, please join us. Happy to, on Discord, Telegram. We are on Twitter, twitter.com/arcadicofinance. You can find us there with Discord and Telegram links. And yeah, Kier, really love what you're doing to your channel. I was looking at some of the videos before. Looks really useful for the Indian community. So thanks for putting, your energy into the world, evangelizing crypto. Really appreciate everything doing that these days. So thanks for having me, and enjoy your evening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Philip. I wish you all the best for Arcadico.finance and also for STX, and all the very best for the future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.